Have you ever felt that shift in the air, that sudden change where everything you thought you knew about someone just melts away? That's exactly what happened to me one quiet night. When the sound of my bedroom door creaking open wasn't just the house settling, but the start of something I never saw coming. Something unexpected. A still night in the living room became the turning point where everything we thought we knew about each other shifted in an instant. I had always relished the peaceful solitude of my nights. There was something comforting in the quiet, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting gentle shadows across the walls. The world outside felt miles away, and for once, I didn't have to think about anything. I could immerse myself in the stillness with the hum of the fan and the occasional whisper of the wind outside as my only company. My life had always been simple and predictable until that night, when something changed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't fully understand. I woke up to the faint sound of my door creaking open. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, something you get used to when you live in an old home, but then I heard the sound again, this time more deliberate. I blinked into the darkness, tried to adjust my eyes. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, its faint sound mixing with the rustling of the door. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Who could be up at this hour? I tried to ignore the feeling of unease creeping up on me. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild in the dead of night. But then I heard again the soft, almost imperceptible step of someone crossing the floor. I wasn't alone. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I lay there pretending to be asleep, hoping that whatever it was would just go away. My heart raced in my chest, my thoughts racing faster than the seconds ticking by on the clock. Who was it? My mind ran through a list of possibilities, but none made sense. I hadn't invited anyone over. I lived alone. It was impossible. And then I heard the sound again, this time closer. My eyes shot open as I felt a presence in the room. Something I couldn't explain, but I knew it was there. The stillness of the air, the weight of it all, made my pulse quicken. I didn't want to turn over, didn't want to see who or what it was. But I had to know. I twisted my body slowly, trying to avoid making any noise, and there he was, my nephew Alex, standing at the foot of my bed, his figure barely visible in the dim light. I didn't say anything right away. My mind was trying to catch up with the situation, still processing what was happening. Alex at this hour? He wasn't supposed to be here. Alex, I whispered, my voice a little more trembling than I cared to admit. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a slow step toward me, his face obscured by the darkness. I could see the outline of his body, a lanky frame, the familiar silhouette of the boy who had visited me countless times over the years. But this time, something was different. The air felt charged, as if something unspoken hung between us. "What are you doing here?" I asked again, a little more forcefully. I tried to sit up, but the room felt heavy, as though my limbs were made of stone. He took another step closer, and I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. I didn't mean to wake you," he finally said, his voice low and shaky. I was about to ask him why he was in my room at this hour when he suddenly reached out. My body tensed in response, unsure of what was happening. His hand hovered just above mine, but he didn't touch me. He stopped, as if he were hesitating, and then, before I could even react, he turned and left the room, his footsteps fading down the hall. I didn't know what to do. I lay there in the darkness, the silence of the room settling around me. Was it a dream? Had I imagined it all? My heart was still racing in my chest, my mind replaying the moment over and over. But there was no denying the strange feeling that lingered in the air. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of the shadows felt like a reminder of the strange encounter. I stayed in bed, staring up at the ceiling, wondering what Alex had been doing in my room in the first place. He was always quiet, a bit reserved, but this was different. This felt wrong. Why had he come to me at such an odd hour? And what was that strange hesitation in his movements? By morning, the incident felt like a half-forgotten dream, a vague memory that didn't quite make sense. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just overthinking things. Maybe he had needed something. Maybe it was nothing at all, but I couldn't let it go. The image of him standing there, just watching me, stayed with me. I couldn't get out of my mind. I decided to go downstairs and make myself some coffee, hoping it would clear my mind. The house was still as usual. The air had a cool crispness to it, and the sun had just begun to peek through the curtains. It seemed like any other morning, but there was something off about it. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was the tension from the night before that I hadn't fully processed. When I stepped into the kitchen, there he was again, Alex, sitting at the table, staring into the mug in front of him, his eyes distant and unfocused. He didn't look up as I entered, his gaze lost in some thought I couldn't quite decipher. "Morning," I said, trying to sound normal, trying to erase the unease from my voice. He nodded without saying anything. The silence between us was thick and heavy. I could feel the words hovering, but neither of us spoke. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask him why he'd come into my room last night, what had been going through his mind, but I didn't know how to bring it up without making things awkward. Instead, I just sat down across from him, sipping my coffee, tried to ignore the tension in the air. We sat there for a while in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. But the silence was broken when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft, barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to upset you." I looked up at him, trying to make sense of his words. He was looking at me now, his eyes searching mine. I could see the sincerity in them, but there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. "It's okay," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't upset me. I didn't expect you to be up so late. Why were you in my room?" He hesitated, as though choosing his words carefully. I had a nightmare. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I wasn't sure if I believed him. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me, but I didn't press him further. There was a weight in his words, but it was something I couldn't quite understand yet. And with that, the moment passed, the air in the room lightened, but the unease I felt stayed with me. Something had changed between us, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what, but I knew one thing for sure: the story didn't end there. The following days passed in a blur. I tried to carry on with my normal routine, but every time I caught a glimpse of Alex, my mind wandered back to that strange moment in the dead of night. His presence seemed different now, charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. He no longer felt like just a nephew I had known for years. There was something new, something unsettling about him. The awkwardness between us was palpable. We had both pretended like nothing had happened, like that night didn't matter, but it did. It was impossible to ignore the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. He had apologized, but it didn't feel like enough. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. The mornings were the worst. We would sit across from each other at the breakfast table, exchanging polite but strained pleasantries. Alex's eyes, usually so distant and quiet, were now hard to read. He would glance at me occasionally, but his gaze was always fleeting, as if he were afraid to meet my eyes for too long. I tried to act normal, to pretend that everything was fine, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. One afternoon, I found myself pacing in my room, restless and unable to focus. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to his visit that night, something unsaid between us. My thoughts circled around the event, overanalyzing every detail. What had made him come to my room, and why did he leave without saying a word? Was it just a bad dream, or was it something else? It felt like a secret he wasn't ready to share, and the not knowing gnawed at me. I decided I couldn't let it go. I needed answers, needed to understand what was happening. The weight of silence between us was unbearable, so I found myself standing in front of his door that evening, unsure of how to begin. The hallway was eerily quiet. The only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator from downstairs. I knocked gently, taking a deep breath as I waited for him to answer. When he opened the door, his face was unreadable. He didn't smile or say anything right away, just looked at me, his eyes darker than I remembered. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady but betraying a slight tremor. He nodded and stepped back to let me in. The room was the same as always, cluttered with his things, a few books on the desk, clothes scattered across the floor, but this time it felt different. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air thicker than usual. I could almost hear my heart pounding in my chest. about what happened the other night. I began, but the words seemed to hang in the air, suspended between us. Alex looked at me, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of his thoughts. "I've been thinking about it too," he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "I don't know why I came in. I just needed someone. I was scared." I studied him closely, tried to read the meaning behind his words. There was something in the way he spoke, the hesitation in his voice, that made me think there was more to the story. "Scared of what?" I asked, my voice softer now, trying to draw him out. His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I thought he might tell me, but instead he just shook his head. "It doesn't matter. I'm sorry." I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. It was as if he was holding something back, something important. His apology didn't feel genuine, not completely. It was like a rehearsed line, something he had said 1,000 times but didn't truly believe. "Alex," I said, my voice firmer now, "you don't have to lie to me. I'm not going to judge you. Just tell me what's going on." He didn't meet my gaze this time. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his hands fidgeting nervously with the sleeve of his shirt. I could see him struggling, as though the words were trapped inside him, unwilling to come out. I don't know how to say this," he finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, "but something's been changing. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I've been seeing things differently, feeling things differently, and when I came into your room that night, it wasn't because of the nightmare, it was because..." His voice trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. The silence between us grew heavier, and I could feel the tension in the room tightening like a knot that wouldn't loosen. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the internal battle he was facing. He was struggling with something he didn't know how to express. I took a step closer to him, wanting to comfort him, but at the same time, I couldn't help the sense of unease that was creeping up my spine. "What is it, Alex? You can tell me." He seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then, with a sudden, almost frantic movement, he grabbed my hand. His touch was cold, his fingers trembling slightly. For a second, I froze, caught off guard by the intensity of his grip. "Alex," I began, but he didn't let go. Instead, he pulled me toward him, his gaze never leaving mine. "I don't know what's happening to me," he said urgently, his voice laced with confusion. "But I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't know if it's normal or if I'm losing my mind, but I can't help it." My breath caught in my throat as his words hit me like a shockwave. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The room felt too small, too close, and my heart was racing in my chest. He let go of my hand, and I took a step back, unsure of what to make of the situation. The silence stretched on, the weight of his confession hanging between us. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what he had just revealed, but I couldn't deny the way his words had affected me, the strange mix of fear and curiosity that stirred inside me. "I didn't mean to make it weird," he said quickly, his voice almost pleading. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm sorry." I wanted to say something, wanted to comfort him, but all I could do was stand there, frozen in place. The space between us had grown too large to bridge in an instant, and I didn't know how to close it. Alex seemed to sense my hesitation. He took a step back, his shoulders slumping into defeat. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he muttered. "I'll leave you alone." But as he turned to walk away, I felt a strange pull in my chest. I wanted to reach out to stop him, but my body remained still. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just passed between us wasn't something we could easily forget. The tension that had started to build between us was only just beginning, and I had no idea where it would lead. I watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure of what was next. The lines between us had blurred, and there was no going back, but of course that was just the beginning. The days after that conversation hung in the air, suspended in a strange stillness that neither of us seemed to know how to navigate. Alex avoided eye contact whenever we were in the same room, and I did my best to give him space, but the weight of our silence was undeniable. It was as though the words we hadn't spoken lingered between us, invisible but ever present. It was late one evening, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon when I found myself in the living room, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself. The hum of the television was on in the background, but it felt distant, like it wasn't even part of the world I was inhabiting. My thoughts kept drifting back to that moment in his room, the rawness of his confession, the desperate look in his eyes, and the way his words had seemed to slip out of him like they had been waiting for so long. I wasn't sure what to do with that information. On one hand, I could tell myself it was just a phase, something he was going through as he grew older. On the other hand, there was a deeper, unspoken tension that neither of us could ignore. It was like we were both trapped in a strange limbo, unsure of how to move forward. I heard footsteps behind me and looked up to see Alex standing in the doorway. He was dressed casually as usual, but there was something different in the way he held himself. His shoulders were tense, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie, his posture a little more rigid than I remembered. I'd grown used to seeing him so relaxed, so carefree, but tonight he seemed different. There was an edge to him, a rawness that I couldn't quite place. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was making the right choice. His gaze was fixed on the floor, avoiding mine, but I could feel the weight of his words even before he spoke them. I set my phone down and turned to face him, offering a soft nod. "All right," I said gently. "What's on your mind?" Alex took a step into the room, but he didn't sit down. Instead, he walked over to the window, staring out into the night. The street lights cast long shadows across the yard, and I could hear the rustle of leaves outside as the wind picked up. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us felt heavier than before, as if it were charged with the anticipation of something we both knew was inevitable. "I've been thinking about everything," he began, his voice low but steady. "About what I said the other night, and I don't know if I can take it back, but I need to tell you something." I could feel my heart rate pick up. His tone was different, more serious, and I could tell that whatever was coming, it was going to change everything. I didn't know whether I was ready for it, but I knew I couldn't turn away now. He turned to face me, his expression tight, his eyes darker than usual. I don't know how to explain this, but when I said that I've been feeling things differently, it's not just some passing phase, it's real. I don't know what's going on with me, but I can't deny it anymore. And I don't want to pretend that I'm not feeling what I'm feeling. My stomach tightened at his words, the mixture of fear and curiosity rising in me. I had an inkling of where this was going, but hearing him say it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. There was no denying it now. This was no longer just some awkward moment between us. This was something deeper, something neither of us could ignore. I stood up, not sure what to do with myself. "Alex," before I could finish, he stepped closer, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. His eyes softened slightly, but there was a hunger in them, a desperation to be understood. It was as though he was standing on the edge of something, unsure whether to leap or pull back. "I can't keep pretending like this doesn't matter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been fighting this, trying to push it down, but it's too much. I don't know how to make you understand, but it feels like I'm losing myself." I took a step back, my mind racing. This wasn't how I had imagined this conversation going. His words were raw and unfiltered, like he was letting out something that had been trapped inside him for far too long. But despite the turmoil in his voice, I couldn't ignore the pull I felt toward him, the way his presence seemed to fill the room, the way his pain seemed to resonate with something deep inside me. It was confusing, disorienting. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice trembling despite myself. "I'm not sure I understand it either." He took another step forward, his hand reaching out tentatively, like he wasn't sure if he had the right to touch me. For a moment, we just stood there, inches apart, the tension between us almost unbearable. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice barely audible, "but I can't keep pretending that nothing's changed, that I'm not feeling this." I didn't know how to respond. His words had opened something inside me, something I wasn't prepared to face. I felt torn between wanting to reach out to him, to comfort him in some way, and the fear of what that might mean for us. Everything between us had always been simple and innocent, but now there were no easy answers, no simple way forward. I wanted to speak, to say something that would make sense of it all, but my mind was a jumbled mess of emotions. The air between us crackled with unspoken words, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. It was as though the world had shifted beneath my feet, and I wasn't sure how to find solid ground again. Without thinking, I took a step closer to him, my eyes meeting his. The proximity was overwhelming, and I could feel the heat of his body against mine. We were standing so close now that I could hear the soft hitch of his breath, his heart beating in time with mine. I could feel the pull between us, like gravity, like it was pulling us together despite everything telling me not to give in. "Alex," I whispered, barely able to speak, and then, without warning, his lips were on mine. Our lips met in a tender, exploratory kiss, as if testing the boundaries of a newfound connection. I froze, my body still, my mind racing to grasp the intensity of the moment. But as he pulled away, his gaze locked onto mine, I felt an inexplicable shift within. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted, tilting my world forever. Time suspended, and the air thickened with unspoken emotions. Neither of us spoke, the silence hanging like a promise between us. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think as the weight of this new reality settled in. But then our eyes met, and I saw the vulnerability, the fear, and the longing for something more. In that fleeting moment, everything changed. Our bodies swayed closer, drawn by an unseen force. The space between us dissolved, leaving only the fragile, unspoken understanding that bound us together. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice shaky. "I didn't mean to. I just couldn't help it." I stepped back, the weight of his words crashing into me. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to make sense of the whirlwind that had just unfolded. All I could do was stand there, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to understand the sudden shift in our relationship. And yet, despite everything, there was no turning back now. The days after the moment in the living room were a blur. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, as if the world was moving at a different pace from the one I was used to. Alex and I drifted into an unspoken, uneasy silence. The kiss was still fresh in my mind, like an image I couldn't wipe away. It didn't feel wrong, but it also didn't feel entirely right. I didn't know what to do with it. Alex was avoiding me even more now. He would spend his time in his room, not coming out for meals, his door always closed. I tried to give him space, but the silence between us was suffocating. We both knew something had changed, but neither of us was brave enough to address it directly. There was an elephant in the room, and every time I looked at him, I could feel its weight pressing down on both of us. I spent the next few days in a kind of limbo. I tried to go about my routine as if everything were normal, but there was no escaping the new reality that hung between us. My thoughts were a mess. When I wasn't thinking about work or other distractions, I was thinking about that kiss. The feeling of his lips on mine, the heat of the moment. It didn't help that Alex and I had barely spoken since that night. I wasn't sure if he regretted it, or if he was just too scared to face what had happened. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room again, the hum of the television providing some background noise to the quiet that had settled over the house. I hadn't seen Alex all day. His room was still locked up tight, and the house felt emptier than usual. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, it was him. He was standing in the doorway, looking as uncertain as I felt. His eyes met mine, but there was no warmth there, just an intense, almost painful vulnerability. I knew the moment had come. There was no more pretending. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hesitant, but carrying a kind of determination I hadn't heard from him before. I nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond, but knowing I couldn't avoid this conversation any longer. I stood up, waiting for him to come into the room. His presence felt heavy, like the air around us was thick with unspoken words. For a moment, neither of us said anything. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. "I've been thinking a lot," Alex started, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie, his posture still guarded, "about what happened, about everything." I could feel the words coming. I could sense the weight of the confession that was hanging on the edge of his lips, and I braced myself for whatever was next. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I had no choice. We couldn't keep living like this, pretending that the kiss and the tension didn't exist. "I don't regret it," he said suddenly, looking up at me with a mixture of fear and honesty in his eyes. "But I don't know what it means. I don't know what to do with this." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always known that there was something unspoken between us, but hearing him admit it, hearing him say that he didn't regret it, changed everything. I wanted to reach out to him, to comfort him, but I didn't know how. The boundaries that had once seemed so clear between us had become blurred, and I wasn't sure how to navigate them anymore. "I don't either," I admitted quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what it means either, but I can't stop thinking about you." The silence between us stretched on, heavy and thick, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Alex shifted on his feet, his eyes searching mine for any sign of reassurance, but I had no answers to give him. I had no idea what came next, or if there even was a next. "I don't want things to be awkward between us," he said after a long pause, his voice small, almost fragile. "But I can't pretend that things are the same anymore." I nodded slowly, understanding exactly what he meant. We had crossed a line, and there was no going back. It didn't matter how many times we pretended that nothing had changed, it had. Our relationship, whatever it had been, was now forever altered, and there was no going back to the way things were. "I don't want that either," I said softly, "but I don't know how to fix this. How do we move forward?" Alex stepped closer, the space between us almost non-existent now. He looked at me like he was searching for something, some kind of reassurance, maybe, or perhaps an answer to the question we were both too afraid to ask. The tension in the room was palpable, like something was about to snap. "I don't know either," he said, his voice barely audible, "but I can't keep pretending like this isn't real." I stood there, staring at him, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out to close the distance between us and let whatever was happening play out. But there was also a part of me that was scared of the unknown, scared of the consequences of crossing a line we might never be able to uncross. Before I could say anything, Alex moved even closer, his hand brushing against mine. The touch was light, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a vulnerability there that mirrored my own. "I just need you to understand," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know what this means, but I need you to know that I care about you a lot." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. There was nothing left to say that would make this easier. We had reached a point where neither of us could deny what had been building between us. Whether we were ready for it or not, we were already too far gone. Alex took another step closer, his face inches from mine. The air was thick with the unspoken tension. The question that we had both been avoiding hanging in the balance, but neither of us spoke it aloud. Instead, we just stood there, our breaths mingling in the silence. And then, with a softness I hadn't expected, he kissed me again. This time it wasn't tentative, it wasn't uncertain, it was full of longing and need. And it was everything I'd been afraid to admit to myself. It was as though the floodgates had opened, and all the feelings we had been holding back poured out in that one silent moment. When he pulled away, there was no need for words. We both understood the lines had been crossed, and there was no going back. But in that moment, it didn't matter because whatever was happening between us was real, and we both knew it. I didn't know what the future held or where this would lead us, but for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. We had taken the first step, and whatever came next, we would face it together. Wow, what a powerful story of unexpected connection. What did you think of Alex and his uncle's journey? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this emotional story and want to hear more heartwarming and sometimes heart-wrenching LGBT tales, make sure to like this video, subscribe to LGBT Stories, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Thanks for watching.